Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this, what is it, Thursday, almost at the end of the week, for this really exciting training webinar that is being brought to you today by the Statewide Training Initiative in partnership with Coast to Coast Legal Aid. Legal avenues to provide protection to survivors of human trafficking. For those who don't know me, my name is Alexis Alvarez. I am the Director of Statewide Training at Florida Legal Services. And also for those who don't know, this exciting training webinar is part of the larger series that we are doing in honor of Human Trafficking Awareness and Prevention Month. At the end, I will give you some information on the sessions that we have coming up in the remaining parts of this seminar. But thank you for joining us for the kickoff, the start. And I hope that you find this training to be informative. I hope that you get what you need out of it to continue to move forward and do the amazing work that you all do in the field of protecting our survivors. So, housekeeping announcements, always starting with those. This is being recorded. A copy of this recording will be sent to anyone who registered and everyone who attended live within 24 hours. That recording will come from Zoom, not from me, but I will put my email into the chat. That way you can reach out to me directly if you don't see it in your inbox or you're missing something or you can't access anything. So please feel free to reach out to me if that's the case. Along with that recording, our speaker has generously agreed to give us a copy of her PowerPoint that will also come through with a copy of the recording in that email from Zoom. Finally, in that email from Zoom, you will also get the CLE code. Yes, this was approved for CLE credit, and I will announce that CLE code at the end of the session. I will also put it into the chat, and like I said, it'll come in through email, so don't worry, you will get that CLE code, but you can always reach out to me. Second piece of housekeeping announcements, the closed captioning is on. If you can't see them, you just have to click more and put show captions on. If you have a problem with it, just reach out to me. I know Zoom updated recently. And so if you're having trouble navigating it, like I still am sometimes, I'm happy to help. Final piece of housekeeping announcements, questions and answers. Today, we're going to do something a little different. Today, I am going to attempt to unmute you, and you will have the opportunity to come off mute and interact with our speaker here today. So our speaker throughout the presentation will ask some questions and really wants you to engage. You don't just have to type in the chat. You can get off mute and let us know what you're thinking. So I have not done this in one of my trainings before.
Sorry, I'm like throwing you for a loop on this.
That's okay. I may have to go through and allow everyone to talk. So let me see how that. So I think when I do that, it still puts everyone immediately on mute. Exactly, it does. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go forward with the introductions. And then when I'm done, I'm going to give everyone the opportunity to be allowed to speak. And you can come off mute and interact with our speaker. So be patient with me, and I'm going to move right into introductions so we can get moving forward. And so today we have here Victoria Sexton, who is a staff attorney in the Family Law Unit of Coast to Coast Legal Aid of South Florida. Victoria discovered her passion for survivor advocacy while in law school at the Georgetown University Law Center in Washington, D.C. There, she was a member of the Georgetown Domestic Violence Clinic and participated in Georgetown's Asylum Practicum. After graduating law school, Victoria was awarded a 2019 Equal Justice Works Fellowship that focused on providing free civil legal representation to and advocacy for survivors of human trafficking in Broward County. Then in 2021, Coast to Coast Legal Aid was awarded an OVC grant to continue working with survivors of human trafficking. Victoria is the attorney working under this grant. Victoria is the co-chair of the Stripes Committee for Broward Human Trafficking Coalition and a member of the Broward Victim Rights Coalition, South Florida Human Trafficking Task Force, and the Broward Domestic Violence Coalition. As you can see, your speaker here today is very well versed and knowledgeable on this subject. So I'm going to stop talking and I will turn it over to Victoria. Thank you for being here, Victoria, for speaking, and thank you everyone for being here and joining us and learning today.
Okay, thank you, Alexis. Okay, hi everyone. As Alexa says, I'm Victoria Sexton. I'm really happy to be here today to talk to you about different legal avenues to provide protection to survivors of human trafficking. So I'm just going to kind of jump right in. These are some disclaimers. I'm not going to read them. They're just here for the PowerPoint, especially because we're getting it out after. Okay. So I'm gonna give Alexis just a second to get everyone off mute, but I kind of wanted to go over the why this is so important, legal avenues for protection for survivors, and just why the legal system in general is so important for survivors of human trafficking. First and foremost, protection. As many of you know, there's a lot of criminal cases that go on. There's the traffickers, there's a lot of issues that survivors face, barriers after being out of their situation, out of the trafficking situation. Also, closure. A lot of times this is a huge chapter in someone's life, the victimization they experience, and they just need closure, and the legal system is a great way to do that. Justice, and we're going to talk about this a lot with the victim rights portion of this. A lot of survivors are seeking justice for what happened to them. They want to make sure that that doesn't happen to somebody else, and that the legal system can be a really empowering way to do this. And autonomy. They've spent part of their life being victimized, having someone control them, force them to do things. The legal system can bring autonomy to survivors. So I think it's really important to remember that as well. And then lastly, new beginnings. And I'll talk about this a little bit with name changes and a few of the other things that we're going to discuss today. But a lot of my clients have told me that with expungements and name changes and things that kind of give them a fresh start, it really propelled them into their new beginning, to their new chapter of life. So I just think that these are just things to keep in mind as we're talking today, and just to remember why we're doing this and why it's so important for survivors and victims. Okay, so just a little pre-presentation survey, things to keep in mind. What is human trafficking? I'm going to do a very quick primer on the federal definition, just to make sure that we're all on the same page. Who are victims of human trafficking? Who are traffickers? And what are some of the legal remedies available to protect survivors? So the first thing I want to do is go over the federal definition of trafficking. There's three kind of elements to it. We have process, means, and ends. So to kind of prove somebody is a victim of human trafficking on the federal level, you have to prove harboring, recruiting, moving, or obtaining of a person by force, fraud, or coercion for the purpose of slavery, debt bondage, sex trade, or involuntary servitude. And I just, again, want to stress, this is on the federal level. So you will see that Florida has its own statute that defines human trafficking, and they even break it down for minors versus adults and sex trafficking versus labor. So I just wanted to kind of go over the primer of the federal definition, but I'm not going to go into the different definitions that we see at the state level as well. And also, as Alexa says, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat or go ahead and unmute yourself and ask me. I'm happy to answer them. And I would also love if people would participate in the discussion.
And on that note, very quickly, I forgot to announce, if there are any general questions about human trafficking in general, hold those to the end. But if it's specific to something that's on the screen or something that Victoria is saying, jump in.
Yes. Okay, so I kind of wanted to talk about who do we think is a victim of human trafficking? Can anyone give me examples of who comes to mind when you think about victims?
This is Monique Alawa. I would think young people are especially vulnerable to this.
Yes. Hi, Monique. Anyone else?
Women.
Yes.
Children.
Yes.
Migrant farm
Immigrants.
workers.
Sorry, what was that?
Migrant farm workers.
Yes. Thank you for bringing in kind of the labor side of it.
And other immigrants.
Yes. Awesome. Okay, so as you can see, anyone can be a victim of human trafficking. We see that victims are all ages, senior citizens to young children, all races and ethnicities, both men and women, kids, community and foster care kids. A lot of times I think our mind goes to the foster care system, which it's true. We do see a lot of human trafficking out of the foster care system, but community kids are at risk too. You know, the more support systems and support network you have, the stronger your connections are and the harder it is to traffic someone with those connections. So it's just kind of important to remember that it really can be anyone. We see citizens and immigrants. I think a lot of times there's this thought that most survivors or victims are immigrants, or they're coming from a different country and they're coming here. I would say that 90% of my clients are American citizens that were born here. So it's just really important to remember it's not who we think of when we think of the movie Taken, or, you know, just the stuff that society has kind of taught us to think about with human trafficking. It really can be anyone. It's a crime of opportunity. Traffickers are not picky. They just want the person, the body, the number, the work. They just, it's really just kind of a number to them. So it's important to remember that when you're thinking about who our victims are, and kind of trying to spot it and recognize it within our society. So who do you guys think traffickers are?
Men.
Okay.
It can be anyone, I would say.
Yeah. Do you think it's somebody that we know, or do you think it could be someone that we don't know?
I would say it's more likely somebody that we know.
Yes. So we see that a majority of traffickers are family members, friends, classmates, people that we are become acquaintances with. You will see like gang members or those random criminals, but that's really, again, that's kind of that Taken movie mentality. That's not actually what we see on a day-to-day basis. Intimate partners, a lot of times, boyfriends, girlfriends, spouses, family members. We see grandmas, aunts, uncles, grandpas, mom, dad. I mean, it really can be anyone, commercial business owners, and even government officials. Like you see sometimes those stories in the news where law enforcement was involved, or a government official or a political person. So just keep in mind, again, it can be anyone, any race, gender, or age. And I think there's a question in the chat.
No, that was just me.
Oh,
Don't.
okay. All right. So, oops. Okay. So the legal services that I'm covering today regarding protection is going to be enforcement and assertion of victims' rights in criminal cases, name changes, and civil injunctions for protection. And then I did want to just do a little shout out for expungements. I know you guys are having a full training on it next week, so I'm not going to go into it too much. But I do think that it's worth mentioning them. There is a human trafficking statute here in Florida that is specifically for survivors who have been forced to commit crimes on part of their trafficking scheme or because of their trafficker. And when it comes to those criminal records, a lot of times it has information about the survivor in it. So it's really important for protection reasons to get that expunged. So I just wanted to throw that out there, but you'll get a full training on that next week. So I'm going to start with Marcy's Law, which is victims' rights. And I'm going to talk about this in relation to survivors of human trafficking and victims. It's for any victim of crime, but we're going to talk about it more specifically. So this, just a little background and history on Marcy's Law. It was voted and passed in November 6th of 2018, and I believe it became law January 8th of 2019 here in Florida. It's part of our Florida Constitution now, which is amazing. Just a little background. Does anyone know the story about Marcy or has heard of Marcy's Law before? Yes. No.
I've heard of it, but I've not, I don't know the background.
Okay.
I've
So,
heard of it and I vaguely know the background.
okay. All right. Well, then I'll go into it. I just didn't want to, if I was talking about something already covered. But so essentially, Marcy was a victim of homicide back in the 1980s. And she was stalked and murdered by her ex-boyfriend. And he was arrested, charged, and then he was out on bail within a week of that. And her family was unaware of this. So they were at the grocery store one day and they literally came face to face with him. They ran into him, and you can imagine kind of just the overwhelming trauma and emotional turmoil that would cause somebody if you didn't know that they were out on bail and it's a week later. I mean, it would be absolutely devastating. So after this happened in the early 2000s, 2009, her brother, Marcy's brother, started working on Marcy's Law for All. And that is just the set of rights and rules that he advocated for victims and their family to have a constitutional protection and kind of just equal rights in the criminal system for victims. So it's amazing. It's been passed in several states now, and we have it here in Florida. So you'll see why it's so important, and we'll talk about it a little more, but for victims of human trafficking, especially, you'll see that a lot of times the criminal cases hinge on the victim's testimony because there's not a lot of other evidence. So it's really important that victims feel empowered and they feel, supported in these criminal cases. And that's why victim rights is such a huge protection and such a huge kind of source of empowerment for victims. So under Marcy's Law, a victim is a person who suffers direct or threatened physical, psychological, or financial harm as a result of the commission or attempted commission of a crime or delinquent act, or against whom the crime or delinquent act is committed. And then also the term victim includes next of kin for homicide victims. So I'm going to go over just a little bit about why, even though these are constitutional rights that are afforded to victims, it's really important that they have an attorney. And it's kind of nice to think about it this way. We have, your traditional courtroom, you have the prosecutor and you have the defense attorney, and then who's there for the victim. We're kind of just adding a third table in to make sure that their voice is heard. So, as I said, some of these rights apply immediately upon commission of the crime and arrest, but some of them only apply upon request. So if victims aren't aware of these rights, it could be a huge hindrance to them obviously invoking them or even knowing that they should be afforded them. Additionally, if victims have questions like legal questions or concerns, a lot of times advocates should not be answering those things, should not be providing legal advice. And prosecutors are, again, ethically kind of not providing that legal advice. They're there to represent the state. And I think that, there's that common misconception that prosecutors represent the victim and what they want and what their interest is. But we see, time and time again that that's not always true. I mean, sometimes it aligns, but not always. And then also you just want to make sure that their interests are being stated in court. A lot of pro se people, victims in criminal cases don't know how to file motions, don't know how to make their voice heard. So having an attorney and having kind of that third table in there really does make a difference. So we're going to go over the main rights that we have under the Florida Constitution now for victims. And the ones in green, I'm going to take a little more time on just because I feel that these are most relevant for HT cases, for human trafficking victims and prosecution cases. So we'll start with the right to due process and to be treated with fairness and respect for the victim's dignity. Again, you think that this is just something that would be standard and not something that has to be written down, but it's something that, victims obviously struggled with. So it's important to remember that. And the right for freedom of intimidation, harassment, and abuse. This one's huge as well for HT. I should have put it in green. A lot of times, and we see this with domestic violence as well, but the perpetrators of the crime, the traffickers, their abusers, they will often kind of intimidate or harass the victim to try and get them to drop the charges. So that would be a huge hindrance in a victim going forward with the case. And then number 3, the right within the judicial process to be reasonably protected from the accused and any person acting on behalf of the accused. Again, this is an organized crime. Even if a trafficker is in prison or in jail or is on trial for something, there are third parties that could always be intimidating and harassing the victim and the victim's family. So it's important that we have this right. The right to have safety and welfare of the victim, the victim's family considered when setting bail. You know, we want to make sure the victims kind of have a say in bail, and for their story to be completely transparent to the judge, because it could affect their well-being if somebody gets out on bail and they're extremely dangerous. The right to prevent the disclosure of information or records that could be used to locate or harass the victim or the victim's family. Huge with human trafficking. A lot of victims are in safe houses, they're moving around, they're concerned for their safety, they don't want their addresses disclosed, they don't want their phone numbers disclosed, they don't want where their work is disclosed. All these things that they're doing to kind of move forward with their life, they're terrified of their traffickers finding out. So it's really important that this information is confidential. Okay, and then these are the rights that are upon request. So the right to reasonable, accurate, and timely notice of and to be present at all public proceedings and involving the criminal conduct. So again, actually just had a client call me who had a criminal case with her partner, and she didn't realize that he was let out on bail. And it was because she didn't get notice of something. And this was not a case I was on. I'm dealing with her family case, but it was really, it shook her up. She didn't know that something was going on, and it was really upsetting for her. So it's really important that, you know, you assert this right, so you have a right to notice and to know when things are happening in cases. The right to be heard in public proceedings involving pretrial and other release. Like we said, a lot of these cases are violent and horrible, and victims want their voices heard to know why this person is a danger and why they shouldn't be out in the community. The right to confer with the prosecuting attorney. Oh, I see we have a raised hand. I don't know if it went down. Alexis?
I think it went down. I don't see it up now.
Oh, I see another raised hand.
Oh yeah, no, here I see it. Okay.
Okay.
Let's see. Geraldine, did you raise your hand? Is there something that you wanted?
I did. I was going back to what you were talking about earlier, Victoria, about safe houses. Now, it's my understanding a lot of these young women, once they finally get to you or to law enforcement for protection, are they immediately housed safely? And how does that work to then get them into this process?
So with safe houses, it really depends. Sometimes with prosecution, if it's like a really big case, they will move victims into safe houses. That doesn't happen oftentimes statewide. I believe it's more federal, but a lot of times with the younger victims, they'll be moved into safe houses or community houses that the addresses are not disclosed. But sadly, housing is a huge issue that we face here in Broward County, but all over the state for victims. You know, this type of victimization really, you start from the bottom up. You need housing, you need medical, you need legal, you need job security. There's a bunch of different things that you kind of are pursuing all at once. So it can be extremely overwhelming. And we're all aware the housing market is insane right now. Rent is insane. So housing victims is something that we always struggle with. It's always a topic of discussion at our meetings. We're always trying to get more funding for it. So it's definitely a huge issue. And there's not enough, but there is for, I would say, minors. We do have safe houses and community houses that we try to house them at.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Okay, so then I believe on the right to confer with the prosecuting attorney concerning any plea agreements. This is obviously huge. If somebody's getting a plea deal, victims want to know and they want to be a part of that decision. Especially victims of human trafficking who are going to be testifying, or if they were going to be testifying, they want to know if this plea deal happens, am I not testifying anymore? What's the plea deal agreement? Is there going to be, there's so many questions that they have. Is there going to be no contact? All these things that they want to know. So I think it's really important that that's a right that victims assert, and usually through an attorney. And the right to provide information regarding the impact of the offender's conduct on the victim and the victim's family. the right to receive a copy of pre-sentence reports and any other report or record relative to the exercise of the victim's rights, the right to be informed of conviction, sentence, and adjudication, place and time of incarceration. Again, victims want to know when somebody's getting out, where they're going to be, what prison they're going to be in, all those types of things, sentencing, conviction. Do they want to give a victim impact statement? They need to know these things to be at sentencing. So it's really important. Again, the right to be informed of all post-conviction processes and procedures, the right to be informed of clemency and expungement procedures, the rights of victim as provided in all these subparagraphs that apply to any first appearance proceedings are satisfied and reasonable. That's kind of hard for first appearances, but yes. The right to prompt return of victim's property when no longer needed as evidence in a case. A lot of times we see that victims' social security cards, immigration documents, birth certificates, IDs, all these things that are identifying documents, traffickers hold those as a form of control. And when they do that, obviously for criminal cases, that could be used as proof that this person had so-and-so's, identifying documents, just another way to prove that they were, forcing someone to do something or holding something over someone. So those things can end up in evidence. And when that happens, obviously it's really hard to live without your ID. I know I just had my purse stolen a couple weeks ago, and it was a hassle to get everything back. And I was just several days without my ID. I cannot imagine how somebody could feel for months, or longer without their identifying documents. So it's really important that they get prompt return of their property after. And then the right and timely restitution in every case. Again, just you can't imagine the medical debt, there's so many different types of restitution that we see in these cases that victims could need and deserve. And so to make sure that that right is kind of asserted as well. And the right to proceedings free from unreasonable delay and to prompt and final conclusion of the case. This again is really important. I mean, we talked in the beginning about new beginnings, but you can imagine that when criminal cases drag on, and this is something that the victim has looming over their head, that at some point they're going to have to testify, at some point they're going to be deposed. These are things that are going to kind of hinder them from moving forward, at least fully trying to move on to their next chapter. Just knowing that this is something that's coming up, or they might be subpoenaed for. And so just having these cases move at a prompt and reasonable schedule is really important for victims of human trafficking. And the right to be informed of these rights, and to be informed that victims can seek advice of an attorney with respect to their rights. So a lot of times I know our law enforcement partners will hand out our brochures saying that we have a program here at Coast to Coast Legal Aid for victim rights. I know that they're really good about that. They want to make sure victims know this stuff, and also the prosecutors as well, so that they have, another attorney that they can turn to say, hey, can you make sure they know about this trial or this pre-sentencing or this bail motion or whatever it may be. So it's really important that victims know about these rights. So these trainings are great. And then I was just going to talk about some of the motions that we've filed, or our partners in this program have filed on behalf of victims of crime. So again, why it's so important to have an attorney. We've done a motion to strike on a deposition where our client was deposed and we were unaware that the deposition was set. And not only that, but she needs an interpreter and she was not afforded one. So we were able to strike that deposition from the criminal hearing, which is huge. We've done motion to have family members appear via Zoom during the pandemic, which again, when you're having these victims come in and testify, it's often nice to have the family members there, to have that support system, have their advocates there. So again, it's huge. And then we've also done motions to revoke pre-trial release based on violations. Again, this might be where a third party, or even the defendant is contacting the victim in violation of pretrial release. And that's a great way to, kind of bring this up to the judge and make sure that they are, getting their release revoked and that victims feel more safe. So those are just a few of those. Does anyone have questions on victim rights before I move on to the next section? Okay. So now I'm going to talk about name changes. So why do you guys think that a survivor would want a name change or need a name change?
For protection.
For protection, yep. Anything else?
I would imagine that it would feel like embracing a new identity and kind of maybe releasing or relinquishing themselves of some of the negativity associated with their experiences with their previous name.
Yes, 100%. Anything else?
They might have their trafficker's last name still.
Yep. So protection first and foremost. While a lot of cases traffickers are criminally prosecuted and end up in jail, I mean, how many do not? They're out there. And so for protection reasons, a lot of survivors just want a new name, a new location, just want to cut ties completely so that nobody can find them. So protection is a huge reason that we do name changes. Autonomy, and this was kind of what someone had brought up. A lot of times a name for somebody it's the way their trafficker called them. It's the way everyone calls them, but their trafficker specifically, it's tied to that past, that history. And they just want to start new and have something completely fresh, something that's their own, that they've made a decision on their own about, that they came up with on their own. And that's really huge for survivors. And then closure, again, it's a new chapter, you're starting completely over. So closure is a huge one as well. I've had all three of these in a case where I had a client who came from a different state. Two of his traffickers were prosecuted and ended up in prison, and one did not. And he was terrified that the trafficker that wasn't in prison was going to find him. And so we did a name change for him, and he came up with a name that was very special to him and that he came up with it on his own. And he told me after that, like, he just felt such a sense of like security, closure, and just like a layer of protection that he didn't have before, because nobody would be able to find him now from that past life. So it's huge. So I'm just going to go over quickly the name change process. And if you guys have questions, again, please feel free to ask them. So getting a name change was a common law right, as long as it's for a lawful purpose. So unlawful reasons would be to avoid creditors, law enforcement, bankruptcy, those types of things. It was codified into the Florida statute 68.07. When you file a name change, there is several things you need to file for your client: a petition for name change. This is a Florida Supreme Court form, so just go on there. It's super easy. Don't reinvent the wheel. A notice of related cases, and then I always file a notice of confidential information in a court filing. And honestly, I file this in pretty much any case that I'm working on with survivors, just because, and I ask that like pretty much the whole file be confidential, just because obviously if you're filing something in Florida, you can look it up on the Broward clerk site or wherever you are. So if traffickers are looking them up, you're really not doing them any favors if it's completely open to the public. And then if your client is indigent, make sure to file an application to determine civil indigence if that's applicable. And then once all of this is filed for your client, you're going to instruct your client. Once it's filed and accepted by the clerks, I should say, you are going to instruct your client to go get fingerprints. Now, this is only if your client is changing their name to something completely new. If you're going back to a maiden name, then you don't need fingerprints. But I would say for the most part with human trafficking name changes, it's a completely new name. So, and then once those have been submitted, you can go ahead and schedule your final hearing and prep your client. And it's pretty much as simple as that. Some helpful tips and things that I consider when I'm doing a name change for a client is, do you need a residency witness? a lot of times under the name change statute, you have to live in Florida 6 months prior to filing for the name change. And a lot of times my clients have lived here, but maybe didn't get their Florida ID right away, or there was just issues getting it. So they need something to prove that they lived here for the 6 months prior to filing. So just make sure you check with your client if you need a residency witness. Be prepared in the final hearing to explain any criminal record. Hopefully, if you're working with a survivor of human trafficking and they have criminal records related to their trafficking, they're getting it expunged. But if not, you want to make sure you're able to kind of just explain any criminal record, any issues that they might have in their background. And then do your due diligence. The petition has, 10 years of addresses, 5 years of work. And there's just a lot of stuff that you need to lay out, that where your client's been, where they were born, their addresses. You want to make sure that you do a thorough background check with them. And a lot of times, clients don't remember all that. I don't remember all that. So Westlaw People Search is a huge help if you're doing name changes. And do I have any questions on this? Okay. I really quickly just wanted to go over social security number change. This kind of goes hand in hand with name changes. As we discussed before, a lot of times survivors and victims have had their social security number held by their trafficker. They've used it to open credit cards. They've done things with it. They have it memorized. They know it. So a lot of times when survivors come in for name changes, they're also very interested in, is it possible to get my social security number changed? So I just wanted to throw this in really quick. It is possible, which is kind of crazy to think about. But yeah, you can get a new social security card and number. You just have to prove there was harassment, abuse, or grave danger when using the original social security card number, and evidence of misuse, and misuse is causing you continuing significant harm. And then your client would need to prove age, citizenship, and lawful immigration status. Sorry, what was that? Oh, okay. Oops. Then your client would have to have an interview at the Social Security office. We have a great connection with the one down here in Broward County. They're aware of the issue of traffickers taking social security cards and holding them as a form of control. And they have stated that, this is something that they would consider grave danger and a harassment and misuse. So if you do have a client that needs that kind of assistance, you can go with them. Oh,
41
I think we have some.
44.
And I'm gonna mute Hannah.
Okay. Sorry. This is why Alexis was like, don't do.
I actually like it. I think it's really great and interactive.
But if you do have a client that is in need of a new social security number, just know that you can go with them as their advocate, as their attorney to the Social Security office for their interview. And I think it's really important that if you can make it, try to go with them, because they do kind of ask, some questions just to get the groundwork of like, what's the issue. Some of the officers that work there are not very trauma informed, or maybe aren't very familiar with human trafficking. So it's just really nice that they do allow attorneys to go and kind of just be there to support your client through it. Okay. It's not letting me. Oh. Okay. And then the last legal remedy that I want to cover is civil protections for injunction. So does anyone know how many types of injunctions there are?
5.
I would say that there are 8.
Okay. So, there's 5 and then there's 8. So you guys are both right. So we have our traditional domestic violence, dating, sexual violence, stalking, and repeat. And then there's like 3 other that they're different in the sense that usually it's not the petitioner or the victim who's asserting it or trying to get the injunction. It's somebody on their behalf, maybe law enforcement, maybe a caretaker, and that would be risk protection, vulnerable adults, and Chapter 39. But today we're going to focus on domestic dating, sexual stalking, and repeat. And this would be a whole nother training if we were to go in detail about each one of these. But I kind of just wanted to highlight how, as attorneys, we can use these different injunctions on behalf of survivors of human trafficking, and kind of what to think about and what to look at for when you're talking to a survivor of human trafficking. And they might be saying, hey, I want an injunction or a restraining order, or whatever they call it when they come to you. And you can kind of think of, okay, which one would apply? And then there's also some things to think about when filing. For instance, say the individual fled from somewhere. Say they came from Texas and now they're in Florida, and they're like, I want a restraining order, I want an injunction. When you file an injunction, that serves the person you're filing against. So if that person isn't aware that you are now in Broward County, Florida, when you file that injunction and have it sent out for service, they're going to be aware that that's where you fled to. So that's something to keep in mind too, and just advise your clients on, because I think a lot of times we just think of the protections that come with it, but there's also consequences as well. So I'm going to kind of go into the 5 main ones that we were talking about, and just kind of point out how they would apply to human trafficking, and then kind of go into a little more of maybe why you would want to file domestic violence versus something else. So we're just going to cover that really quickly. Okay, so with domestic violence, as we talked about at the beginning, a lot of times survivors of human trafficking are married to their partners, they're related by blood, they're living together in a family unit. So if you have that relationship between the victim and the trafficker, domestic violence injunctions are probably your best bet. I mean, obviously you have to see if there was assault, aggravated assault, battery, aggravated battery, sexual assault, sexual battery, stalking, aggravated stalking, kidnapping, false imprisonment, or any other criminal offense resulting in physical injury or death. But domestic violence is kind of that umbrella one that it kind of covers a lot of things. And additionally, with domestic violence, it's kind of easier to prove than with dating, for instance, because you just have to prove that someone is a victim of domestic violence, or she or he is in imminent danger of becoming a victim. So with dating, and I'll go into it a little more, it's an and, not an or. So it's a little harder to prove. Also with domestic violence, the case law is pretty victim friendly. We see there's a lot more case law for domestic violence because there's just so many DV injunctions. So it's a good kind of starting injunction to look at to see if it fits your case. Then we have dating violence. So a lot of times, especially with younger victims of human trafficking, we see that they started out as dating their trafficker. They call this Romeo pimps, where they kind of, kind of like court or like kind of buy things for their victims and make them feel special and make them feel like they're dating. And then after they kind of reel them in with all the special treatment is when the trafficking actually begins. So in those cases, victims, are dating their trafficker, or they think they're dating their trafficker. So if you kind of have that relationship, a dating violence injunction might be, the one that works the best for you and for your client. You have to prove with these that there was a dating relationship within the past 6 months, and that the nature of the relationship was characterized by expectation of affection or sexual involvement between the parties. And then you have to also show that they've been involved over time and on a continuous basis. So it's not just like a one-time date thing. So dating violence, again, like I said, that could be something to think about when you're talking to a victim of human trafficking who's interested in an injunction. Sexual violence, that's defined by a sexual battery or any other forcible felony wherein a sexual act is committed or attempted. So this, again, sadly, sex is a form of control, sometimes rape, that we see with traffickers and victims. So again, a very delicate conversation to have with the survivor. But if you're looking at the different injunctions and that's something they want to pursue, it might be one that fits your case. And then stalking, a person who is willfully and maliciously repeatedly following, harassing, or cyber stalking another person. We do see this sometimes with human trafficking. Harassing is a course of conduct. It's not just like a one-time thing. It's not someone following you once. You have to prove a course of conduct. And you also have to show that it's a series of acts over a period of time. And it doesn't have to be a long period of time, but you have to show that it's more than once. So again, stalking is a possible option for human trafficking. And then lastly, repeat violence. So 2 incidents of stalking or violence committed within 6 months of filing. And I feel like that's the one. I've had just a few for HT, but I feel like repeat violence and domestic violence are kind of the 2 big ones that I've had. Okay, so now I wanted to do a hypo and just kind of see how we would apply what we learned today in this hypo. So I'm just going to read it quickly, and then please feel free to jump off mute and kind of give me some of your thoughts, ideas. What do we need to know more about? That kind of stuff. So Becky is 21 years old. She has lived in North Florida her whole life. She grew up in and out of the foster care system. She has been a victim of sex trafficking ever since she aged out of the system. Her traffickers repeatedly use physical abuse to control Becky. In addition to physical abuse, her traffickers have possession of her birth certificate, social security card, and driver's license. 9 months ago, 2 of her 3 traffickers were arrested and charged with 5 counts of human trafficking by local authorities. The other trafficker fled and has not been arrested. Becky used this opportunity to flee and moved to Broward County. She is seeking assistance from local human trafficking providers in Broward County. Advocates have connected Becky with your law firm for pro bono assistance. What are some legal options Becky has available to her to ensure her safety, and should she pursue them?
Definitely a name change.
Yep.
Social security card number change since they have her social security card.
Yep.
Request to be at any detention or sentencing for the 2 traffickers who have been arrested and charged.
Yes. What are some things you would want to know more about before moving forward with Becky on any of these things?
I have a question, sorry.
Yeah.
If 2 of the traffickers were arrested, we assume they're going to go to trial. Maybe Becky is going to be a witness. Should we be considering that before we move with a name change? I would assume like something like that will want to come up. And so maybe it'll be best to wait until that is sorted out before we start changing her identity and trying to protect her.
That's a great point. I've actually had this conversation with a survivor recently where she was very adamant that she wanted to be a part of the criminal case, but she wanted a name change. And we kind of just like came together. And I was like, listen, we can do it, but there's no way I can say that they're not going to be able to get your name. Like, you can't redact your name from every court filing if you're going to testify, and like it's just stuff slips through the cracks, so we agreed that like, hey, once the criminal case is over and you're completely done with it, let's go ahead and change it, but until then it's just really not worth the risk of it coming out. So that's a great point. What about an injunction? Do you guys think we should file?
Well, they can file, but the other guy fled, so it might be hard to serve him, but it still might be worth it to file for an injunction, although she'll be revealing that she's in Broward County by doing so.
Yeah, so that was kind of like why I threw that in there. A lot of times you'll notice when you're working with victims of human trafficking and survivors, they're moving, they've moved completely to a new place. So sometimes injunctions are just like, there's a lot of great benefits to them, but if the trafficker or the individuals involved don't know, it might not be worth it. So just keep that in mind. when you have any kind of case where you're serving the trafficker as the other party. Divorces, I'm trying to think, well, we have divorces that we have to serve the other party, paternity cases, child support, anything like that. And then I see Khadijah raised her hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, isn't it possible to also put in address confidentiality with those restraining orders? Like if there's a concern for safety, at least to preserve it?
Yeah, so for sure, we always do that. We always put that the address is confidential, but if you're serving, say the trafficker was in North Florida and Jacksonville, and you're filing in Broward County, you're still gonna have that Broward County filing style on the case, and they're obviously going to be informed that their case is in Broward County. So that just kind of narrows it down for the trafficker to know, okay, she's in Broward County, that's where she's filing. So that's just the concern with that. It's, you would always keep the address confidential. Okay. Other things that I would want to know, you know, the trafficker says that they use physical abuse. Was there sexual abuse? What else were they doing to control her? Because that just might open up different types of injunctions for us. Other things I would want to know is, does her trafficker know where she is? Did she get her birth certificate back? You can actually help survivors, you know, get a copy of their birth certificate. These are things that like kind of are tangential to the legal system, but it's really helpful when one person can kind of help them with all of it. So if you're already doing pro bono work, it's really nice for the survivor if you're able to just help them, you know, obtain a certified copy of their birth certificate, let them know about the option to get a new social security number, help them get a replacement driver's license, those types of things. And then as somebody mentioned, victim rights, it looks like they were charged locally, so it's a state case. That's important to remember. If it's a federal case, Marcy's law would not apply. State cases it would. So make sure that she's aware of her victim rights in criminal cases if she wants to assert them, and connect her with an attorney or represent her in that case yourself. So I think that's about it for this one. And then I just have some quick little, if you know, you suspect someone's being trafficked, you should tell someone. You know, a lot of times we see stuff and we're like, what are we supposed to do? Never try to address it yourself. Call law enforcement, report it to the human trafficking hotline. If it's a child, report it to the the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, or you can even call the U.S. Department of Justice. I've never done that, but you can. If you guys want more information nationally and statistics about human trafficking, the Polaris Project is amazing. They have tons of statistics that are available to you. Office for Victims of Crime, especially this month, they're doing a lot of stuff for Human Trafficking Awareness Month, so just check them out. The National Human Trafficking Hotline, and like I said, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. If you're looking for community resources, here in Broward, at least, our law enforcement agencies are so well informed. They're all part of a local task force. They're always willing to do educational events and stuff with us. So they're a great resource. If trafficking is happening in a school resource officers, teachers, and counselors, and then obviously the abuse hotline and the FBI field office here in Florida. If you think that there's some kind of labor trafficking happening with seasonal farm workers, there's actually a phone number you can call specifically for that as well. And then I just wanted to know if you learned something useful today about human trafficking and the legal avenues, if you would just raise your hand. Okay, yay. That makes me happy. And then this is just an overview of what we do here at Coast to Coast Legal Aid of South Florida. We have 3 main units and we all do amazing work, different work. But this is kind of just an overview of those different areas. And then this is my contact information. Please feel free to reach out if you have any questions about human trafficking in the legal field. I'm happy to answer them. Or if you just want to chat more about it, I'm happy to do that as well.
Awesome. Victoria, I can't think of a better way to have kicked off this training series. These are my favorite types of trainings, the ones that are practical, the ones that really give you the knowledge so that when you're going and doing this work, you can look right back on this and you're not lost, you're not alone, and you have an amazing, amazing resource. So thank you very much for presenting and for all that you do. I'm going to quickly put into the chat the CLE code. That is 2211374, N as in Nancy. I did make a little slide to share with you all, but I think that it's too much for me to try to share it right now. But essentially it just has the CLE code, and that code is again 2211374, N as in Nancy. If anyone fails to write it down now or hopped off early or misses it, you will receive an email from Zoom within 24 hours with a copy of the recording, a copy of this PowerPoint, and the CLE code. As always, you can reach out to me directly. My email address is up at the top of the chat. If you need anything, or even if you just want to give more kudos to Victoria, because obviously they are very well deserved. And with that being said, I do want to say, Victoria, I liked this interactive format. Yeah, it really was just enjoyable, and folks, interacting. So, maybe I'll encourage more of my speakers to do this and be brave.
Honestly, it's easier than just talking to yourself to know that somebody's listening. It makes it flow.
I completely understand that. I feel like sometimes I'm just staring at myself, which is not an enjoyable feeling. So I do see we have a couple of hands raised, but they were all addressed. Is there anyone that you saw that maybe wasn't addressed that might have lifted it up?
I think everyone was. I'm looking through now. This is great. Yes, awesome.
Okay. Because we do have a few more minutes. If anybody does have any last minute questions. Awesome. And in the chat, you're getting lots of thank you, great presentation, learned a lot. And I echo all of those sentiments. So if there's anything else, Victoria, you want to say before we sign off?
That's it. Thank you all for participating and just being involved this Human Trafficking Awareness Month. It means a lot.
Absolutely. And on that note, the remainder of the series, it's going to be every Thursday. So we have today, the 12th, next week, the 19th, and then the 26th. The next session on the 19th is going to be presented by Jones Day, and it is going to focus on human trafficking expungements. What I will do is I will include the registration to that training in that email from Zoom, along with the recording and the CLE and all of that. That way you can register, and we can see you all at the next one. All right, everybody, have a wonderful rest of your day. And thank you all for the work that you do. And thank you for being with us here today.